My name is Lillian Baker, 62 years old, and I never imagined my Christmas would begin with my own son refusing to recognize me at his doorstep. "I think you have the wrong house," he said with cold, unfamiliar eyes that used to light up when I entered a room. The perfectly wrapped gifts in my arms suddenly felt like lead weights. 20 years of single motherhood sacrifices and monthly financial support meant nothing in that moment. Before I continue with what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop a comment below and subscribe to join our journey together. I met Thomas in college. He was studying engineering, and I was pursuing a degree in education. We fell in love quickly, married young, and had our son Jackson when I was 28. Thomas was the love of my life, my rock, my everything. When Jackson was 8, Thomas died suddenly from a heart attack. No warnings, no goodbyes, just gone. Our world shattered overnight. I remember the funeral like it was yesterday. Jackson clutching my hand so tightly, it hurt his small shoulders, shaking with silent sobs. That night, I made him a promise as I tucked him into bed. "It's just you and me now, buddy, but we're going to be okay." I kissed his forehead and added, "I will always be here for you. Always." The following years weren't easy. I took on additional teaching jobs, tutored in the evenings, and graded papers until midnight most nights. We moved to a smaller house, cut back on everything except what Jackson needed. Despite the financial strain, we found joy in simple things. Our weekend camping trips became our escape. We'd sit by the campfire roasting marshmallows while Jackson talked about becoming an architect someday. "Mom, I'm going to design you the most beautiful house when I grow up," he'd say, sketching elaborate floor plans in his notebook. "I don't need a fancy house, sweetie. Just having you in my life is enough." I'd tell him, and I meant every word. Jackson was a brilliant student. By his junior year of high school, colleges were already courting him with scholarship offers. But they weren't full rides, and architectural programs were expensive. I remortgaged our home to help cover the costs. When he was accepted to Cornell, I couldn't have been prouder. "Mom, you don't have to do this," he said when he learned about the remortgage. "Education is the one thing nobody can take from you," I told him. "It's worth every penny." We talked every day during his college years. He'd call to tell me about his projects, his professors, his dreams for the future. I lived for those calls. They made the extra shifts and budget meals worthwhile. Everything changed during his senior year when he met Amanda. She was studying business, came from a wealthy Connecticut family with connections in real estate development. When he first mentioned her, his voice had that unmistakable lilt of someone falling in love. "She's incredible, Mom. Smart, ambitious. Her father owns Patterson Development Group. You're going to love her." I met Amanda during Parents' Weekend that fall. She was undeniably beautiful, with perfect blonde hair, and an outfit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She was polite, but kept me at arm's length, offering tight smiles that never reached her eyes. "It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Baker. Jackson has told me so much about you." She said, her handshake brief and formal. "Please call me Lillian," I replied, trying to bridge the gap. "Mrs. Baker is fine for now," she responded with a practiced smile. That weekend, I noticed subtle changes in Jackson. He chose his words carefully around Amanda, checked with her before making plans, and seemed hyper-aware of her reactions. When I mentioned it on my way out, he brushed it off. "She's just particular about certain things, Mom. She has high standards. That's what makes her special." After graduation, Jackson landed a position at Patterson Development, Amanda's father's company. They moved to Boston, where the company was headquartered. Jackson called less frequently, always with the same excuse: "Work is crazy, Mom. Mr. Patterson has me on this big project." When they announced their engagement 6 months later, I was invited to a lavish party at the Patterson estate. I bought a new dress for the occasion, the nicest one I could afford. But standing among their wealthy friends, I felt invisible. Jackson introduced me briefly before being whisked away by Amanda to meet more important guests. Their wedding was the following spring, an extravagant affair at the Boston Harbor Hotel. I was seated at a back table with distant relatives, while Amanda's family dominated the proceedings. During the reception, I barely spoke with my son. When it was time for the mother-son dance, the DJ called for Jackson and his mother. As I stood up, Amanda's mother stepped forward instead. I watched from my seat as they swayed to "What a Wonderful World," the song I'd sung to Jackson as a lullaby throughout his childhood. Later, Jackson apologized. Amanda thought it would be easier this way since her parents paid for the wedding. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'll make it up to you." But he never did. After the wedding, our communication dwindled further. My daily calls to him went unanswered, or were returned days later with brief conversations. "Sorry, Mom, we've been swamped. Amanda and I are looking at houses in Wellesley." When they found their dream home, an imposing colonial in an exclusive neighborhood, Jackson called with excitement in his voice for the first time in months. "Mom, it's perfect, but the down payment is stretching us thin. I hate to ask, but could you help just temporarily?" Despite my teacher's salary and my own mortgage, I agreed. I set up an automatic transfer of $1,200 monthly to help with their mortgage. It was a significant portion of my income, but Jackson was my son. I'd always promised to be there for him. "It's just until I make partner," he assured me. 2 years tops. 2 years turned into 5. During that time, I watched from a distance as their life expanded. Through social media posts, I saw their exotic vacations, Amanda's designer wardrobe, their luxury cars. Meanwhile, I canceled my own modest vacation plans, postponed needed home repairs, and picked up summer school teaching for extra income. Each time I gently mentioned reducing my financial support, Jackson had a new reason why they needed it. Property taxes increased, or "we're renovating the kitchen," or "Amanda's starting her own boutique business." Still, I continued sending the money, hoping each gesture would strengthen our fraying connection. When my birthday or Christmas came around, Jackson would send expensive but impersonal gifts, a handbag I'd never use, perfume that wasn't my taste. They felt like obligatory afterthoughts, rather than gifts chosen with love. Last November, I received a Thanksgiving card with a handwritten note. "Mom, we're hosting Christmas this year. Would be great if you could join us. Let us know. Jackson." It wasn't the warmest invitation, but it sparked hope. After years of declined invitations and last-minute cancellations, maybe this was a turning point. I confirmed immediately and spent the next month preparing. I selected thoughtful gifts for everyone, an architectural history book Jackson had mentioned wanting years ago, craft supplies for their children, Madison and Tyler, whom I barely knew, and a cashmere scarf for Amanda. I baked Jackson's favorite peanut butter cookies, the ones he'd devoured throughout his childhood. I even made a photo album chronicling our life together, hoping to reconnect him with our shared history. As I packed my car on Christmas Eve morning, I felt genuine excitement for the first time in years. The 5-hour drive to Wellesley passed quickly as I imagined the warmth of family, the laughter of my grandchildren, the possibility of bridging the distance that had grown between us. I should have known better. The GPS guided me through streets lined with enormous homes, decorated with professional-grade holiday displays. Even in daylight, the twinkling lights and giant ornaments created a winter wonderland effect. As I pulled onto Woodland Terrace, I checked the address twice before stopping in front of number 42. Their home was magnificent, a 3-story colonial with Greek columns and a circular driveway where 2 vehicles sat parked, a black Range Rover and a sleek Mercedes sedan. The house was tastefully adorned with white lights that outlined every architectural feature, and a massive wreath hung on the red front door. It looked like something from a magazine spread, rather than a home where people actually lived. I checked my appearance in the rearview mirror, applied a fresh coat of lipstick, and practiced my smile. The butterflies in my stomach reminded me of first day of school jitters. I gathered the bags of carefully wrapped presents, balancing them precariously as I approached the front door. Through the decorative glass panels, I could see movement inside. The sound of laughter drifted out, along with the faint melody of Christmas music. I shifted the packages and pressed the doorbell, hearing its elegant chime echo inside. My heart pounded as I waited, a smile fixed on my face. The door swung open. Jackson stood there in a crisp button-down shirt, and pressed slacks, looking every bit the successful professional he'd become. For a split second, I saw confusion flash across his face before his expression hardened into something unrecognizable. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone formal and distant. The smile froze on my face. "Jackson, it's me. Merry Christmas." He glanced over his shoulder briefly before turning back to me. "I think you have the wrong house," he said firmly. I laughed nervously, certain this was some kind of misunderstanding or poorly executed joke. "Very funny. I drove 5 hours to be here. Are you going to let me in?" His expression didn't change. "I'm sorry, but I think you're confused. This isn't the right address." Behind him, I caught a glimpse of Amanda in an emerald green dress, directing a photographer who was setting up equipment in their elegantly decorated living room. Two children in matching Christmas outfits stood perfectly positioned in front of an enormous tree, dripping with ornaments. "Jackson, we confirmed last month. I'm supposed to be here," I said, my voice beginning to waver. He stepped partially outside, pulling the door nearly closed behind him. "Look, we're in the middle of family photos right now. This isn't a good time for whatever this is." The packages in my arms suddenly felt impossibly heavy. "Family photos. I am Family Jackson. I'm your mother." "Please lower your voice," he hissed, glancing nervously at neighboring houses. "You need to leave. Now." In that moment, everything slowed down. I studied his face, searching for any trace of the boy who once looked at me with adoration, who'd climbed into my bed during thunderstorms, who'd sobbed in my arms when his father died. Instead, I saw a stranger wearing my son's face, his eyes cold and unfamiliar. "I don't understand," I whispered, my voice breaking. "There's nothing to understand. You have the wrong house," he repeated mechanically. He stood motionless in the doorway, waiting for me to leave, his body language making it clear I would not be crossing that threshold. The beautifully wrapped packages began slipping from my grasp. The first one fell with a soft thud onto the welcome mat that read, "The Bakers," in elegant script. I made no move to pick it up. One by one, the others followed until they formed a small pile at my feet. Jackson didn't bend to help. Hot tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of him. With the last shred of dignity I could muster, I nodded once and turned away. Each step down their perfectly swept walkway felt like walking through quicksand. I didn't look back, though I felt his eyes on me until I reached my car. My hands shook so badly I could barely insert the key into the ignition. Once inside, the tears came in a torrent. I sat sobbing in front of their house, unable to drive, unable to think, unable to comprehend how the child I'd given everything for could look at me with such complete indifference. 20 minutes passed before I could breathe normally again. My phone remained silent in my purse. No apology call, no explanation text. Nothing. Just the deafening silence of rejection. I finally started the car, but made it only to the end of the block before pulling over again. The pain in my chest was physical, as if my heart was literally breaking. I couldn't drive like this. I couldn't do anything. As twilight descended on Christmas Eve, I sat alone in my car on a street of strangers, wondering where I'd gone so terribly wrong. My phone rang 45 minutes after I'd left their doorstep. Jackson's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but some deeply ingrained maternal instinct made me reach for it. "Hello?" My voice sounded strange even to my own ears, hollow and fragile. "Mom." Jackson's tone was casual, almost bored. "Where are you?" The normalcy in his voice after what had just happened felt surreal, like I had imagined the entire doorstep rejection. "I'm still in your neighborhood," I replied carefully. "I couldn't drive right away." "Look, I'm sorry about earlier. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." He said this without a trace of remorse, as if he were explaining a minor scheduling conflict rather than having denied knowing his own mother. "The invitation said Christmas Eve," I said quietly. "We confirmed by text last month, Jackson." There was a pause, then a heavy sigh. Well, there was obviously some miscommunication. Anyway, the thing is, we're in the middle of our Christmas Eve traditions. We have the photographer here for our annual family portraits, and then Amanda's parents are coming over for dinner. I see. I didn't know what else to say. The pain was too raw, too overwhelming. It's nothing personal, Mom. We just want some peace during the holidays, you know? Having extra people around creates stress, especially for Amanda. She likes things a certain way. Extra people, not family, not his mother. Extra people. And what about tomorrow? I asked. Should I come back then? Another pause. Actually, tomorrow is pretty packed too. We have brunch at the club, then the kids are opening presents from Amanda's parents, and then we're having dinner at her brother's place. I gripped the phone tighter. So when were you planning to include me in your Christmas, Jackson? Mom, don't be like that. Relax. We're all just trying to have a peaceful holiday. Maybe you can come by the day after Christmas for a quick visit, or we could meet for coffee somewhere. Coffee somewhere. Like an acquaintance. Like someone he was fitting into his schedule out of obligation. The lump in my throat made it difficult to speak. I understand, Jackson. I'll give you the space you need. Great, thanks for understanding. I knew you would. The relief in his voice was palpable. I'll text you about that coffee. Merry Christmas, Mom. Merry Christmas, I whispered back. I was about to end the call when I realized the line was still open. I could hear muffled sounds on the other end. Jackson had forgotten to hang up. Is she gone? Amanda's voice crystal clear despite the distance. Yeah, Jackson replied, his voice suddenly closer to the phone. I told her we needed space. God, that was awkward, Amanda said with a laugh. Did you see all those packages? Probably more dollar store junk for the kids. I know, right? She never gets that we don't need that stuff. She thinks that money she sends every month buys her a seat at the table, Amanda said, her voice dripping with disdain. As if $1,200 makes any difference to us. It barely covers the gardener. Jackson laughed. I know, but it's easier to just let her keep sending it. Makes her feel useful. Whatever. As long as she's not ruining our Christmas card photos with that awful coat she was wearing. Your mother has zero sense of style. True. Hey, can you grab me a beer? My mother always stresses me out. The conversation continued, but I couldn't bear to hear more. With trembling fingers, I ended the call and dropped the phone as if it had burned me. Their words replayed in my mind on a torturous loop. She thinks that money she sends every month buys her a seat at the table. The money I'd been sacrificing so much to provide the transfers that had me working extra jobs and delaying my retirement meant nothing to them. Worse than nothing, it was a joke. I'd been sending them $1,200 monthly, not because they needed it, but because it was the only thread still connecting me to my son's life. And they knew it. They had been using my desperation to maintain a relationship with my only child as a tool to exploit me financially. All those years I'd believed Jackson when he said they were stretched thin with the mortgage. All the times I'd eaten ramen noodles for dinner so I could send money to help with their financial strain. Meanwhile, they were spending on gardeners' club memberships and photographers for Christmas card portraits that I would never receive. I stared out at the darkening sky, watching as holiday lights began twinkling in windows along the street. Families were gathering, celebrating, connecting. And here I sat utterly alone, having driven 5 hours to be rejected by the person I loved most in the world. The pain morphed into something else, then something with edges sharp enough to cut through the fog of shock. Anger. Not a blind, destructive rage, but a slow-burning, clarifying anger that brought with it a strange kind of relief. For the first time, I saw the situation with complete clarity. This wasn't about miscommunication or bad timing. This wasn't even about Amanda's influence, though, that clearly played a part. This was about a fundamental lack of respect. My son, the person I had centered my entire life around since the moment he was born, no longer valued me as anything more than a monthly deposit in his bank account. I started the car again, this time with steady hands. I wasn't going to sit outside their house feeling sorry for myself. I had given Jackson everything, including my dignity. It was time to stop. Using my phone's GPS, I located the nearest hotel with vacancy, a modest Holiday Inn, about 15 minutes away. As I drove there, I made a silent promise to myself. This would be the last Christmas I spent like this. Something had to change, and it needed to start with me. Checking into a hotel on Christmas Eve was a surreal experience. The lobby was decorated with twinkling lights and a large tree, but the festive atmosphere only amplified my isolation. Families with excited children checked in for holiday getaways. Couples carried shopping bags with last-minute gifts, and the staff wore Santa hats as they cheerfully welcomed guests. "Just one?" the receptionist asked, her smile faltering slightly as she processed my reservation. "Yes, just me," I confirmed, avoiding eye contact. "Are you in town visiting family for the holidays?" she inquired conversationally as she typed my information. The question felt like salt in an open wound. "Something like that," I mumbled, focusing intently on my credit card as I handed it over. My room was on the 4th floor, a standard double with bland artwork and a view of the parking lot. I placed my overnight bag on the luggage rack and sat heavily on the edge of the bed. The silence was deafening. No Christmas music, no excited chatter, no sounds of wrapping paper being cut or cookies being baked. Just the faint hum of the heating unit and occasionally distant laughter from other rooms where people were celebrating together. I turned on the television for background noise and flipped through channels until I found a Christmas movie. The cheerful family reunion scene that was playing felt like a cruel joke. I quickly changed to the Weather Channel instead. As evening deepened into night, I tried to distract myself by ordering room service, but when the turkey sandwich arrived, I could barely eat. My appetite had vanished along with my holiday spirit. I kept replaying the day's events, each recollection bringing a fresh wave of pain. I remembered all our past Christmases together. Jackson's face lighting up at age 5 when he unwrapped his first bicycle. The year he was 10, and insisted on making breakfast for me, resulting in burnt toast and runny eggs that we ate together while giggling. The Christmas after Thomas died, when we both cried while hanging his favorite ornament, then held each other until the worst of the grief passed. Where had that boy gone? When had he transformed into this cold stranger who could dismiss me so easily? I picked up my phone and scrolled through old photos, lingering on images of Jackson throughout the years. His gap-toothed elementary school smile, his awkward teenage phase with braces and acne, his proud pose in his college graduation gown. Each image represented a chapter in our shared story, a story I had thought would continue throughout our lives. Being a mother had defined me for so long. After Thomas died, it became my primary identity. I wasn't just Lillian anymore. I was Jackson's mom. Every decision I made, every dollar I saved, every sacrifice I endured was for him. I had wrapped my entire existence around motherhood, and now that role seemed to be dissolving before my eyes. I opened my banking app and stared at the transaction history. Month after month, year after year, the same amount transferred from my account to Jackson and Amanda's $1,200. Money that could have repaired my leaking roof. Money that could have replaced my 15-year-old car. Money that could have funded the retirement account I'd been neglecting. Had I been using these transfers as a way to buy my son's love? The thought made me physically ill. I'd never seen it that way before, but Amanda's words echoed in my mind. She thinks that money she sends every month buys her a seat at the table. Is that what I'd been doing all this time? Paying for inclusion in my own son's life? I tossed the phone aside and lay back on the bed staring at the ceiling. Tears slid silently down my temples and into my hair. The weight of the day's revelations pressed down on me like a physical force. I felt simultaneously empty and overwhelmed, hollowed out, yet drowning in emotion. Sleep evaded me that night. I watched the digital clock tick from hour to hour, 11 p.m., midnight, 1 a.m. Christmas arrived without fanfare in my silent hotel room. I thought about the presents I'd left on Jackson's doorstep. Would they bring them inside, or leave them there to be collected with the trash? The thought of my carefully selected gifts being discarded brought fresh tears. By 4 in the morning, exhaustion finally pulled me into a fitful sleep. I dreamed of standing outside a beautiful house, knocking on a door that never opened, calling to people who couldn't hear me. When morning came, I awoke feeling different. The crushing pain remained, but alongside it was something new: clarity. I had spent years enabling a situation that diminished my worth. I had allowed myself to be reduced to nothing more than a financial resource. I had participated in my own exclusion by accepting the scraps of attention Jackson occasionally threw my way. It wasn't just Jackson who needed to change, it was me. I needed to reclaim my dignity, my independence, and my sense of self-worth. I needed to stop buying my way into a relationship that should be based on love and respect. As sunlight filtered through the hotel curtains on Christmas morning, I made a decision that would alter the course of our relationship forever. It was time to cancel the automatic transfers. It was time to stop enabling behavior that hurt us both. It was time to stand up for myself, even if it meant potentially losing my son completely. The thought terrified me, but continuing as we were wasn't an option anymore. Sometimes love means setting boundaries. Sometimes it means letting go. I started Christmas morning with a ritual I'd maintained for decades: a cup of strong coffee while watching the sunrise. The hotel room's small coffee maker produced a mediocre brew, but the familiarity of the routine brought a sliver of comfort. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug and stared out the window as dawn broke over the suburban landscape, painting the sky in delicate pinks and golds. There's something clarifying about mornings. The chaos of emotion that had overwhelmed me the previous night had settled somewhat, leaving behind a painful but necessary lucidity. I could see my situation now with painful precision, like examining a wound in bright daylight rather than shadows. I reached for my phone and opened the banking app. My finger hovered over the automatic transfers section. For 5 years, $1,200 had left my account on the first of each month, flowing into Jackson and Amanda's life, while they actively excluded me from theirs. The next transfer was scheduled for just 1 week away. I took a deep breath and selected the recurring payment to Jackson's account. The app asked if I was sure I wanted to cancel this automatic transfer. I had never been more sure of anything in my life. I pressed confirm. A simple notification appeared. Your automatic transfer has been successfully canceled. I expected to feel immediate regret or anxiety, but instead a surprising sense of liberation washed over me. It wasn't about the money itself, though $1,200 was a significant amount on my teacher's salary. It was about reclaiming my power, about refusing to be valued only for what I could provide financially. Next, I opened my email. I needed to communicate my decision to Jackson, but I was determined to do so with dignity. No accusations, no emotional outbursts, just a clear statement of fact. I began typing, Jackson. I've decided to end the monthly financial support I've been providing. This decision is effective immediately. I wish you and your family well. Mom. I read it over several times, resisting the urge to elaborate or explain. Part of me wanted to pour out all my hurt and disappointment, to make him understand the depth of pain his rejection had caused. Another part wanted to soften the message, to apologize for withdrawing support, to leave the door open for negotiation. But both impulses came from the same place of emotional dependency that had led me here. Instead, I kept the message brief and direct. After a moment's hesitation, I pressed send. The email swooshed away, and with it a burden I'd been carrying for years lifted. I had taken my first step toward reclaiming my life. I showered and dressed, then checked out of the hotel. The same receptionist who had checked me in was at the desk. Leaving so soon, it's Christmas Day, she noted with surprise. Yes, my plans changed, I replied, managing a small smile. I'm heading home. Well, Merry Christmas, she offered kindly. Thank you. Merry Christmas to you too. The drive home would take 5 hours, but I wasn't ready to return to my empty house just yet. As I pulled out of the hotel parking lot, I noticed a community center with a sign advertising their annual Christmas meal for those in need. On impulse, I turned in. The center was bustling with volunteers serving turkey dinners and distributing small gifts. I approached an older woman who appeared to be in charge, wearing a Santa hat and directing operations with cheerful efficiency. Can I help? I asked. "I've had a change of plans today and would like to do something meaningful." The woman who introduced herself as Dorothy welcomed me warmly. "We can always use another pair of hands. How are you with gravy?" For the next 3 hours, I served food-washed dishes and chatted with community members who had nowhere else to go for Christmas. There were elderly people whose families lived far away, young singles unable to travel home, and families struggling to make ends meet. Amid their circumstances, they shared smiles, stories, and genuine holiday spirit. As the meal service wound down, Dorothy approached me again. "Thank you for your help, Lillian. It made a real difference." "It helped me more than you know," I admitted. "I was supposed to spend today with my son and his family, but it didn't work out." Dorothy nodded understandingly. "Family can be complicated, especially during the holidays." "Very complicated," I agreed. "Do you accept donations I'd like to contribute to your programs?" "Absolutely," she said, guiding me to a small office where she explained their various initiatives. One program in particular caught my attention, a scholarship fund for single parents continuing their education. "We help with tuition books, even childcare during classes," Dorothy explained. "Many of these parents are working multiple jobs while raising children alone. The extra support helps them build better futures for their families." The resonance with my own past was unmistakable. I wrote a check for $2,400, the equivalent of 2 months of what I'd been sending Jackson. Dorothy's eyes widened when I handed it to her. "This is incredibly generous," she said. "It's going where it's needed and appreciated," I replied. "And I'd like to set up a monthly donation going forward. A smaller amount, but regular." As I drove away from the community center, I felt a sense of purpose that had been missing for too long. The money that had been flowing into a one-sided relationship would now help people who truly needed it. It felt right. It felt healing. The highway stretched before me as I began the journey home. Christmas Day traffic was light, giving me space to think. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to contemplate a future not centered around Jackson's approval. What did I want for myself? What dreams had I set aside? What would bring me joy? The questions were simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. At 62, I was rediscovering myself not just as Jackson's mother, but as Lillian Baker, a woman with her own value, her own dreams, her own life to live. As miles of asphalt passed beneath my tires, I made mental notes about changes I wanted to implement. The roof repairs I'd been postponing, the art classes I'd always wanted to take, the book club at the local library I'd never had time to join because I was working extra hours to maintain the transfers to Jackson. I wasn't naive enough to believe that one decision would magically heal the rift between us or instantly transform my life. There would be difficult days ahead, doubts, and probably tears. But as I drove toward home on that Christmas afternoon, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. Not hope that Jackson would suddenly change, but hope that I could build a fulfilling life regardless of his choices. By the time I pulled into my driveway that evening, I was exhausted but resolute. My small house with its peeling paint and sagging porch welcomed me home. It wasn't grand like Jackson and Amanda's colonial, but it was mine, filled with memories and possibilities. I carried my overnight bag inside and flipped on the lights. The modest Christmas tree I decorated before leaving stood in the corner, its multicolored lights blinking cheerfully. I plugged in the tree, put on some soft music, and poured myself a glass of wine. "Merry Christmas to me," I whispered, raising my glass in a solitary toast. For the first time in years, those words didn't feel hollow. The week following Christmas passed in silence from Jackson. No acknowledgement of my email, no response to my decision to end financial support, not even a belated holiday wish. Each day, I checked my phone with decreasing expectation until I stopped looking altogether. In that silence, I began rebuilding my life. I started with small changes, reorganizing my living room, clearing out closets filled with items I no longer used, creating space both physically and metaphorically. I called a contractor about the roof repairs I'd been postponing and scheduled the work for the following month. I registered for a watercolor painting class at the community college, something I'd wanted to do for years. On New Year's Eve, instead of spending the evening alone watching the ball drop on television, I accepted an invitation from my colleague Susan to attend a gathering at her home. The party was modest but warm, filled with fellow teachers and their families. We shared stories, laughed, and welcomed the new year together. When midnight struck, I was surrounded by people who genuinely seemed happy to have me there. To new beginnings, Susan toasted, clinking her glass against mine. New beginnings, I echoed, feeling the truth of those words deep in my bones. The following week, I discovered a support group at the local library, specifically for parents experiencing estrangement from adult children. With trepidation, I attended my first meeting on a rainy Tuesday evening. 8 people sat in a circle, each carrying stories of rejection, confusion, and heartache similar to mine. "I'm Lillian," I introduced myself shakily. "My son cut me off at Christmas, though I suppose it's been coming for years." "Welcome, Lillian," the facilitator, a compassionate woman named Margaret, responded. "You're not alone here." For the next hour, I listened to stories that echoed aspects of my own experience. Parents whose children had gradually or suddenly severed ties, often with little explanation. The details varied, but the pain was universal. Some had been estranged for months, others for decades. What struck me most was discovering how common this situation was. I'd been carrying my pain in isolation, believing my experience was unique in its devastation. But here was an entire group of people navigating the same difficult terrain. "The hardest part," confessed Robert, a retired accountant whose daughter hadn't spoken to him in 5 years, "is the shame. I don't tell people because I'm afraid they'll assume I must have been a terrible parent." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group. I felt my throat tighten with recognition. "That's exactly it," I said. "When people ask about Jackson, I make excuses. He's so busy with work, or they travel so much. I can't bear to say, my son doesn't want me in his life." "Society expects certain relationships to be unconditional," Margaret explained. "Parent-child bonds top that list. When those bonds break, we not only lose the relationship, but also face a kind of social stigma." By the end of the meeting, I had exchanged phone numbers with 2 other members and promised to return the following week. For the first time, I didn't feel defective or uniquely rejected. I was part of a community of people working through similar pain, and that knowledge itself was healing. My new routine was interrupted 10 days after Christmas when my phone rang displaying Jackson's number. I nearly dropped the device in surprise. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. "Hello, Mom." Jackson's voice sounded tense. "Did you send an email about canceling your monthly transfers?" No greeting, no inquiry about my well-being, just straight to the money. The directness was actually refreshing in its honesty. "Yes, I did," I replied calmly. "I sent it on Christmas Day." "Well, I just saw it. What's this about? Are you having financial problems?" His immediate assumption that only financial hardship would cause me to stop sending money was telling. It hadn't occurred to him that I might choose to discontinue support for any other reason. "No, Jackson. My financial situation is unchanged. I've simply decided to allocate my resources differently moving forward." There was a pause then. "Is this because of Christmas Eve? I told you there was a miscommunication about the date." "This isn't a punishment, Jackson. It's a boundary," I explained, surprising myself with my composure. "I've been supporting you financially for 5 years. That support is now ending." "We're counting on that money, Mom," he said, his voice rising slightly. "We've built it into our budget." I almost laughed at the irony. "According to Amanda, $1,200 barely covers your gardener. I'm sure you'll manage." Another silence, longer this time. "What are you talking about?" "You forgot to hang up the phone during our Christmas Eve call," I said quietly. "I heard your conversation with Amanda." "Mom, I can explain that. Amanda was just frustrated about the timing. She didn't mean anything by it." "I think she meant exactly what she said, Jackson. And so did you." The calls began increasing in frequency over the next few days. First Jackson, then Amanda, then Jackson again. Each message more urgent than the last. By the 2-week mark, they were calling multiple times daily, their voicemails becoming increasingly desperate. "Mom, please call me back. We need to discuss this financial situation." "Lillian, this is Amanda. We should talk about what you think you heard. There's been a misunderstanding." "Mom, the mortgage payment is due next week. We're going to be short without your contribution. This isn't fair." I listened to each message but didn't return the calls. I needed time to strengthen my resolve to practice the boundaries I was learning about in my support group. Margaret had warned me that enforcing boundaries often triggers escalation before acceptance. "People who are accustomed to crossing your boundaries will resist when you start enforcing them," she'd explained. "Stay firm, but also prepare yourself emotionally for the pushback." The pushback came in full force when Jackson appeared unannounced on my doorstep exactly 17 days after Christmas. I was just returning from grocery shopping when his luxury car pulled into my driveway. He stepped out looking uncharacteristically disheveled, his usually perfect hair uncombed, his expression a mixture of frustration and desperation. "You've been ignoring my calls," he said accusingly, as I carried grocery bags toward the house. "I've been taking some time to think," I replied, continuing toward the door. "You're welcome to come in and help me put these groceries away if you'd like to talk." He followed me inside, looking around as if seeing my home for the first time, though he'd grown up within these walls. In a way, perhaps he was seeing it anew, through the lens of his current lifestyle. The modest furnishings, the dated kitchen, the carefully maintained but far from luxurious surroundings. "Why did you cut us off?" he demanded as I unpacked vegetables into the refrigerator. "Is this some kind of revenge for Christmas Eve?" I closed the refrigerator door and turned to face him directly. "No, Jackson, this isn't revenge. This is me recognizing that our relationship has become unhealthy." "Unhealthy, Mom? You've been helping with our mortgage. There's nothing unhealthy about family supporting each other." "Support should be mutual," I said. "Financial assistance shouldn't be a substitute for respect." His expression hardened. "So this is about Christmas Eve. We had a miscommunication about the date. I apologized for that." "This is about much more than Christmas Eve," I explained patiently. That was just the moment when I could no longer deny what our relationship had become. "I heard you and Amanda talking, Jackson. I heard how you really feel about me and my contributions." He had the grace to look embarrassed, at least momentarily. "You weren't supposed to hear that. Amanda was just frustrated." "Which made it more honest, not less," I pointed out. "The truth is, you've been using me, Jackson. Maybe not intentionally at first, but that's what it's become. You take my money while excluding me from your life. You make me feel like an intrusion when I try to be part of your family." "That's not fair," he protested weakly. "Isn't it? When was the last time you called just to check on me? When was the last time you invited me to anything important in your children's lives? When was the last time you remembered my birthday without me reminding you?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. "I've allowed this situation to continue because I was afraid of losing you completely," I continued. "I thought if I just kept giving, eventually you'd let me back into your life in a meaningful way. But that's not happening, and it's not healthy for either of us." "So what now?" he asked, anger creeping into his voice. "You just cut us off without warning. We have bills to pay, Mom. You and Amanda have well-paying jobs, Jackson. You live in a $2 million house with luxury cars in the driveway. You vacation in Europe and belong to a country club. You don't need my teacher's pension to survive." "Our lifestyle has certain obligations," he began. "That's your choice," I interrupted firmly. "I'm making different choices now. I've already redirected some of the money to a scholarship fund for single parents. The rest will go toward my own needs, which I've been neglecting." For the first time, Jackson seemed to really look at me to see the aging woman who had given everything for him. His expression softened slightly. "What do you want from me, Mom?" he asked, his tone less confrontational. "I want a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine care," I replied honestly. "I want to be valued for who I am, not what I can provide. I want to be treated as your mother, not an ATM." He sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. "It's not that simple." "It actually is that simple, Jackson. Respect is a basic requirement for any healthy relationship. We talked for another hour, circling the same points, him trying various tactics to restore the financial support, me remaining steadfast in my decision. Eventually, he left with a vague promise to think about things and talk to Amanda. As I watched his car disappear down the street, I felt both drained and strengthened. For the first time in our adult relationship, I had stood my ground. I had advocated for my own worth. Whatever happened next would unfold on different terms than before. 3 months passed, bringing the first hints of spring to my small garden. Crocuses pushed through the soil, promising renewal after winter's dormancy. My life, too, was experiencing a kind of rebirth. The roof repairs were complete, fixing leaks that had plagued me for years. I'd redecorated my living room with cheerful yellow paint and new cushions, creating a space that reflected my emerging sense of self. Every Saturday morning, I attended watercolor classes, discovering a talent for capturing landscapes that I never knew I possessed. My weekly support group had become an anchor in my life. The relationships I formed there were evolving into genuine friendships. We met for coffee outside of our regular sessions, shared resources, and supported each other through difficult milestones like birthdays and holidays. Communication with Jackson had been sporadic at best. After our confrontation, he'd made a few half-hearted attempts to connect, usually when he needed something. I maintained my boundaries firmly but compassionately, refusing to slip back into old patterns while leaving the door open for a healthier relationship. Then on a mild March afternoon, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. I opened it to find Jackson standing there alone. No luxury car in the driveway, his expression uncharacteristically humble. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Can we talk?" I invited him in, noting the changes in his appearance. He looked less polished than usual, wearing jeans and a simple button-down rather than his customary designer attire. There was something different in his demeanor, too, a kind of subdued authenticity I hadn't seen in years. We sat in my newly painted living room, the awkwardness between us palpable. I waited for him to speak, resisting the urge to fill the silence. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he finally began. "About us, about how things have changed over the years, about Christmas Eve." I nodded, but remained quiet, giving him space to continue. "I was horrible to you," he admitted. "Not just on Christmas, but for years before that. I've been taking you for granted, treating you like, well, like Amanda said, like your support entitled you to nothing more than whatever scraps of attention I felt like giving." The honesty was surprising and welcome. "What brought on this realization?" I asked. He sighed deeply. "A lot of things. Partly seeing how you've changed since establishing boundaries. You seem stronger, happier even. It made me realize what I've been doing to you." There was more I sensed. And Amanda and I are having problems," he confessed. "The financial strain without your support revealed bigger issues in our relationship. She expects a certain lifestyle that I'm beginning to question. When I suggested downsizing or cutting back on some expenses, it led to some pretty ugly arguments." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, genuinely meaning it. "For the first time, I'm seeing some patterns that remind me of how we've been treating you," he continued. "The conditional acceptance, the focus on appearances rather than substance." He paused, then added softly, "I miss you, Mom. Not your money, not what you can do for us. Just you. The mom who used to make those awful peanut butter cookies I loved. The one who sat through every one of my boring architecture presentations in college. The one who always believed in me." The words touched something deep within me, a place that had been aching for acknowledgement. But experience had taught me caution. "I appreciate you saying that, Jackson. I've missed you too. But rebuilding trust takes time and consistent action. Words alone aren't enough." "I know." He nodded. "I'm not asking for everything to go back to how it was. I know that's not possible or healthy. I just want a chance to show you that I can change, that I can be the son you deserve." We talked for hours that afternoon, more openly than we had in years. Jackson shared his growing dissatisfaction with the superficial values that had come to dominate his life. I spoke about my journey toward self-reclamation and the joy I'd found in rediscovering my own interests and worth. Before he left, we made plans for dinner the following week, just the two of us. No Amanda, no expectations beyond spending time together. It was a small step, but a significant one. "I'd like to meet your grandchildren properly someday," I said as he prepared to leave, "when you and I have rebuilt some trust." "I'd like that too," he replied. "Madison asks about you sometimes. She remembers you from when she was younger." The knowledge that my granddaughter remembered me brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Tell her I think about her too." In the weeks that followed, Jackson made consistent efforts to reconnect. Our weekly dinners became a ritual. He called regularly not to ask for anything but simply to check in. He remembered my birthday without prompting, bringing a thoughtful gift that reflected my newfound interest in painting. Gradually, carefully, we began rebuilding our relationship on new foundations. It wasn't always smooth. Old patterns occasionally resurfaced, requiring gentle but firm redirection. Sometimes conversations became tense when touching on sensitive subjects, particularly Amanda's continued resistance to my presence in their lives. 2 months after our reconnection, Jackson invited me to dinner at a restaurant to meet Madison and Tyler. Amanda had other commitments that evening, a transparent excuse we all recognized but didn't acknowledge. My grandchildren were initially shy, having been taught to see me as a peripheral figure rather than a grandmother. But children possess a natural openness that adults often lose. By dessert, Madison was showing me her school art projects on Jackson's phone, while Tyler enthusiastically described his dinosaur collection. "Can Grandma come see my dinosaurs sometime?" Tyler asked Jackson, the title, Grandma, emerging naturally and bringing a lump to my throat. "I think that could be arranged," Jackson replied, meeting my eyes with a small smile. The path forward wasn't perfectly clear. Amanda remained a complex factor in our family dynamics. Jackson's marriage was still strained, though he was working on it. My relationship with my grandchildren was in its infancy, requiring patience and consistent nurturing. But something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer defining myself solely through my role as Jackson's mother. I had reclaimed my identity as Lillian Baker, a woman with her own passions, boundaries, and worth. My happiness no longer depended entirely on my son's approval or inclusion. In setting boundaries, I had not only changed the terms of our relationship, but had also given Jackson the opportunity to grow. By refusing to enable unhealthy dynamics, I had created space for something more authentic to emerge. As we celebrated Thanksgiving that year, a modest gathering in my freshly painted dining room, I reflected on the journey of the past 11 months. Jackson carved the turkey while Madison and Tyler argued good-naturedly about who would get the wishbone. Amanda had chosen to spend the holiday with her own family, a situation that once would have devastated me, but now felt like a relief. The table wasn't perfect. Our relationships were still healing, still evolving. But there was genuine warmth in the room, authentic connection, rather than obligation or financial transaction. I had learned that true relationships cannot be purchased, that dignity must sometimes be reclaimed through difficult choices, and that love without respect is ultimately hollow. As I looked around at the faces of my family, imperfect but present, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the painful Christmas that had ultimately led to this moment of genuine connection. Sometimes the greatest gift we can receive is the courage to stand up for our own worth. I know many of you have experienced similar situations with family members. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to join our community of healing and growth. Remember, you deserve relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you strength and peace on yours.